Welcome to another episode of The Undeniable Show. This is a milestone episode for me, and I've not really done an introduction before, but I thought it was worthwhile in this case. One, to say a big thank you to Luke Miller. Luke has come all the way here to Australia from Dallas, Texas, and that is a trek. To get him here logistically was a stress, it was a challenge, and it took a lot of planning for the workshop, the Physique Coaches workshop, but Luke came through and he was able to get here, able to make the time, and very, very, very thankful that Luke came. So a personal note to you, Luke, thank you. It was incredible presenting alongside you, and I think we were able to provide to the room a really different experience to what's normal here in Australia. A big thanks to Cal as well for that weekend. We presented on all things physique coaching and then a little bit of business stuff too. But why this is a big one, this episode in particular, this is the first mentoring client that I've ever had on the show. So we go through all of the, maybe not all of, but some of the challenges that Luke faced in his growth journey, in scaling his businesses into being a worldly recognized brand now. Luke is one of the real ones. He puts in the work, and he's a businessman in his own right. Deserves a lot of the credit for what we did, and I'm very, very proud of him. So this is an incredible episode, a lot of value packed in there, a lot of little nuggets if you listen and read between the lines, that even if you don't work with the upper echelon of clientele and you're working with more Gen Pop, there is a lot of little nuggets in here that you'll be able to apply to your business immediately. And there's a few references in there to Luke being a little bit of a unicorn. He is, but don't let that deter you. There is a lot to learn in here. A big one. Thank you, Luke. And thank you to all that listen. If you can, drop a comment, drop a thing, do the subscribe. You know the stuff. See you soon. Welcome to the show, Luke Miller. Welcome to Australia. You want to tell everyone a little bit about the too long didn't read version of your life so far into fitness, and then we'll dive into the business chat.
Yeah, so fitness kind of came out of golf for me. Like obviously, like playing competitively for 10 years and losing college scholarships. Like I just wanted that competitive drive to move into something else, and I'd gotten into fitness for performance-based stuff at the time, and at a bodybuilding gym though. So when those college opportunities kind of went to the side, like I just transitioned it into bodybuilding, and it was just like every single waking hour, learning everything I could to maximize my ability to have like muscle growth and hypertrophy and everything along those lines. And that's kind of where like I very quickly developed the ability to teach, because I spent so much time looking into it. I was doing biomechanics research in undergrad at school. So like in the engineering program, I was kind of understanding force vector application in the human body very quickly. And that love for just competing in a lot pretty early, which wasn't the best for my competitive career, but for my coaching career was great and invaluable, kind of led me down the path of developing No Switch Fitness, which is obviously the original business that kind of brought me to the forefront. And developing that was opened in 2016. Very early on had competitors, people associated with me with competing because I'd been competing already. And I kind of like had a couple decent athletes pretty early. I told you like I won my first overall within the first year of coaching. And it was pretty quick to just kind of get that initial client roster, but growth after that was just horrendous until pretty much 2020 when I met you, right? Yeah. And from there, it's just been unbelievable ever since, where now we have like, not only is No Switch Fitness my business, but I have J3 Coaching as well, which is a dual entity with John. And then obviously also a big entity in the J3 University as well, the courses that we've built and everything. So yeah, my foray into competing kind of led me to the foray of business building and coaching. And I competed a lot, 6 times over my competing career, which is obviously on camera, not continuing now. I'm about 50 pounds lighter than what I used to be, but it's a passion for a pursuit that I absolutely love that is now developed into me just doing coaching and business building in the space and helping others with the process of winning. And that's really what I'm obsessed with when it comes to coaching and everything that's involved with that.
This is probably going to be a little different conversation to what I guess most of your audience would be used to. Yeah. Talking a little bit more to the steps taken to build No Switch to what it became, and then taking the steps into the further business development that you have, can you rewind the clock for us back to 2020 when we first met, what the position was of your business, and we'll talk about some of the moves that had to be done to get where you are now.
Yeah, so I just graduated grad school. I finished grad school in 2019 at USF. I was in the physique laboratory with Dr. Bill Campbell. Also did some research at UT. That was an exercise phys grad degree on top of my engineering. And I was working in a gym up until COVID and running No Switch Fitness on the side. So it was like a side gig type of thing. Got furloughed from the gym, corporate box gym setting that I was running all the PT for that corporate gym. Got furloughed, and it kind of put me in a position where no switch had to happen. But I lost half my business. So like a side business that already wasn't enough to pay my bills, I lost half of that business with COVID, and then furloughed, and my wife lost her job offer, and we had just sold our house and we're moving halfway across the country. So we were in this place of like no house, no job, like back against the wall, which to me was the best thing that ever happened. Because I've told you, I operate under pressure extremely efficiently. And it was just like the little money that I have, I'm going to make sure that this happens and invest it into whatever I need to do to make this business work.
I think from my perspective, our first conversation that we had, we were very lost in a very big world of like, I'm educated as all hell, but I don't know what to do with it and how to take it somewhere and actually, I guess, navigate this world of like fitness business while still maintaining the integrity to your education. Because there's a lot of options out there that could, that is at everyone's disposal to sell out and just like, okay, I'll go down the quick road, but it's not really the educated road, and it's not really the road that maintains brand equity. And so that was something that you were very firm on, and I respected. And I think it's obviously held you in good stead, but it's also something a lot of people could learn from, that the quick road is not always the best road if you stick with what you have. You obviously leveraged education very well. But the one thing that, when I say you were lost, it was how could you show that education? And content was a big part.
Yeah.
And I think we had the conversation before that, like, content in our world of online coaching, if you're not prepared to do it, you are probably prepared to fail.
Yeah, it's king. Like I produce it for 3 channels now, like YouTube for J3 University and 3 social media channels for J3 University, J3 Coaching, and my personal page. Like I hate it with every fiber of my being.
Yeah.
But I do it because it's what's going to help us grow. And especially with where I'm at now, which I think for people who struggle with it, I think this is a good perspective to have. You need to understand that growing a business eventually leads to you paying other people's bills. And I'm in a place now where so many people rely on me and what I do that it's not whether the content needs to be done. It's just that it's a part of the business and I have to do it, right? So for those struggling, like even if you're in the early stages, like if you have that vision of what you want your business to become, it's like the buy-in has to be there, and it needs to be high quality too. I think that was a big thing of a point of contention I had early on was I'd start doing it, but it wasn't very great content. Yeah. It got me moving, but like investing back into that can be such a large dividend.
It's also one of those things that the higher your brand is perceived, the more production value you probably need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Like if you're just starting out, getting something out is better than nothing. And I think that that's where a lot of coaching in our industry will they'll mentally masturbate in I want to do content, but it's just not good enough. How did you kind of break through? Because if we fast forward this road, like from 2020 to now, 10x size of business, right? For you personally?
Over that now.
Great. So, and a large pillar of that came from initially getting over that hump of like, fuck, I hate content, but I have to do it anyway.
Yeah. So the 10x was 2020 to 2022.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 2024, we're well over 10x what that original revenue marker was in 2020. So, content was a big piece of that. I think some of the hesitation around social media, I do think it's a different game now than it was then. I had a pretty good ability to switch education into call to action then. Now, so many people are producing education. There has to be some proof in the pudding or some ability to transfer that into the skills of coaching that I think has to be there now in order to be able to get a large amount of recognition. There can be some purely educational stuff. And I think this is more just from what I've seen impact my businesses now is like the stuff that I did then would never fly with what we're doing now to get a call to action to
Yeah.
actually get people to convert. But just doing anything is better than nothing. So I don't say that to make people hesitate. Like, just get in front of the camera, test. You can run A to B testing, like collect data on what creates interactions, collect data on what converts. But at the same time, like, just put it out there, because you were talking to me about volume, like, and how much volume you guys were doing and how much that helped y'all's conversion rates from a client inquiry perspective. And it's huge. And I've been in a bit of a rut with my personal page, because I'm producing so much for everything we're doing or updating the courses. Like, I'm just constantly in content production mode. But it's something that I'm now taking the steps to change the way my personal page is going to be, so that I can get back to the clip that I was, right? Because a lot of it for me is in a different place than what it was then. But to bring it back to content production, provide value off of a pain point. Like, if you do that, like, just find pain points for your audience. How do I create a solution for that? And you can create multiple solutions for the same pain point. You create 5 solutions for one pain point, that's 5 reels.
Yeah, and you can say the same thing 10 different ways as well.
And you can say the same thing different ways. And so, like, it doesn't have to be that much like innovative stuff. I like innovative. I've made my way in being innovative, but it doesn't always have to be, because it needs to be about what produces the solution to the pain point for the client. And that's purely what content should be about. And we actually built out a structure of like how we film reels now, of like, produce the pain point, why is this a problem, why it shouldn't be a problem, and where's the solution, so that we're taking them through their customer journey of why it's such a big issue that they have this problem, and how, you know, we can provide that solution for them.
Yeah, because a lot of people will be like, say, pain point or problem aware, but just not to the gravity of which it actually matters. They might know it's there, but how does it impact?
The why, right? They don't answer the why is that a problem. Like, why is that such a big deal that you have that problem? Because it's like we talked about this, the oh shit switch of, like, we've been talking about a lot of business stuff while I've been down here, and some of the things that I'm kind of facing with the next step in scaling. It's like, I'm kind of at the oh shit switch with that, right? And that's going to drive action. Same thing with your clients, right? If you can tick that oh shit switch with them, then you're going to be able to get an action to inquire, or get an action to hire you, or whatever that may be. And so that's where, like, that middle step is so important.
Yeah. You mentioned pain point. I think it's especially when it comes down to the road of business discussions, I think where at least I try and position these conversations in the market is to actually go through a little bit more of the strategical process that people take to get out of pain. I don't often like to just talk about the once I wasn't successful, now I am, and you can do it too. What were some of your pain points in that 2020 to 2022 as you were 10xing, not just pain specifically to potential fail points, but pain in growth?
Time was probably a big one later. I think a lot of people think time is the problem initially. Like, they're so scared of being, like, overworked.
Yeah.
And it's just like, the whole reason you're here is because you have all of the time in the world, right? And so, like, I didn't see that as a pain point, but being married to someone whose time spent is their love language, like, it's always something I have to keep in the back of my mind. But that's, like, probably the one that developed the most from 20 to 22 as, like, a development of a pain point. It's like, my time just can't continue to go. My biggest thing was education, understanding how to run a business. And I think that was my biggest pain point of, I didn't even know how to scale, because I didn't have the business background to be able to understand what scaling was, or how to
directions,
or how to run financials for a business, or even any of the legalities behind it, which is where, like, I think hiring you gave me the peek behind the curtain to have the confidence to be like, I've got this. Because like you said, it wasn't an intellect problem. I had coached winners on stage already. I was like, a volume problem and, like, how to run a business problem. And, like, I still chuckle at this. I was taking direct debits to my personal account at the time, right? And it's for people who run businesses, that's such a bad no-no. Where now we have, like, accountant teams and things like that do it. But it's just little things like that where it's like, you start to learn. Learning creates confidence, in my opinion, especially in a topic area that you're trying to foray into, where that was so invaluable that it just allowed me to push into the action that drove the business. And that action piece is like, you don't know what to do, you can't do it.
Yeah. I think when you really, like, break it down to, like, a lot of the business owners that I work with, and you definitely fell into this category, was like, intellect was not a problem, but you had, I guess, anxiety fatigue. There was too many options of which you could scale, and you didn't know was the way to scale for your business model. And that just causes you to sit there and go, well, fuck, I can't scale. And that fatigue rate, like we always hear about like decision fatigue. When you have too many decisions to make, you don't make the right one. But same things like when you have so many decisions in front of you and they are all possibly good, they are all equally possibly bad. And you have to try and look at like a bird's eye view. It's like 5 years from now, what is the business do I want? Can I scale in that direction now? Rather than scaling in one direction and then realizing 3-4 years down the road that time became the problem and have to completely 180. We caught it relatively early for you, and we found out time was a problem pretty quick.
Yeah.
What part of time was a problem though? Like what, I think online coaches, we often see this, that like, I don't want to be overworked. I don't want to burn out. And when you really look at what they do, it's like they're not actually doing much. Where did you find real overwork or real like lack of leverage to your time across like your, I guess, broad spectrum of daily tasks and weekly tasks? What was the one that became the problematic point?
The reality of, especially the space I live in. So I'm in the physique world, right? In the competing physique world. My entire client base now is completely competitors. The amount of time it takes to prep athletes at a winning level is extremely high. Touch points are extremely high. So from a time perspective, it wasn't so much like the time put into working or business development, because that was just at the desk work or responding to check-ins. It's when the problems arose during preps that like interrupted personal time and my family's time. And then also like I spent a lot of years not really sleeping. But again, it just comes down to, it wasn't an option for me to fail. And so like, I was just going to work until I made it happen. Like hard work always pays off. Like I don't care who you are. But I think the biggest time point issue that I had was, how do I then, like, by the time I got to 2022, I was already starting the J3 University stuff with John. Like I was kind of integrated into that business model and integrated into what I was doing from a teaching perspective. And how do I scale the business to now create a team that is no longer just myself? That was my issue, because I can't coach 160 clients forever, right? Back into 2022, into early 23, I was operating at 150 to 160 clients on my roster, right? And so that, from a time perspective, like if you broke that down into 7 days per week and do the math on how many check-ins per day I was doing, it's like, when was I supposed to work on anything that wasn't check-in related?
Yeah. How can you make the product better? How can you make your life better?
In the business, there was nothing on the business work. And like, I was barely scraping by with the courses we were building at the time. Like I would literally have to spend 3 days on the front end of the week working from like 5 a.m. to like 10 or 11 p.m. on check-ins to open up days to do course development on the J3U side. So I think like that was probably a big contention. Luckily for myself, from a branding, I had the foresight very early in 2016 that I didn't want it to just be me, because it was I've always been impact driven. How do I create the biggest impact and leaving this industry better than I found it? And so that's where No Switch Fitness came, is like, that's a representation of my personality. It fits. I'm like a light switch. I'm either all about something or I can't stand it. And it doesn't have my name attached, where
I spoke about that,
where like it's like Luke Miller Fitness. Yeah. It's like, who wants to go work for Luke Miller Fitness, right? Like nobody. That's not a representation of a ideology that fits like a psychological profile of an individual. Like we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs within clients, employees have it too. Like, what's going to make a client or an employee buy into culture? What's going to make an employee happy? What's going to actually drive an employee to do higher quality work? It's not always money. Not everybody is driven by money. And
it's definitely an element, but it's not the only thing.
It's an element, but if you get them past their need to survive, for a lot of those people, we're starting to start to look into like, what does their self-actualization look like? And not everybody's self-actualization is money.
No.
Right? So when we look at culture building and brand building, I had that foresight very early. I didn't have the skills to build it, like to build the team and to take me out of some of the situations that I didn't need to be in, because let's say of those 160, I probably had 60 of them that I shouldn't have been coaching because they just weren't developed enough as athletes to be working with me, which sounds terrible, but it's just where I had gotten to at that point. And I needed to shovel that off into people that I can now develop. And so that's probably been the biggest time saver. And the hardest one to learn is like hiring the right people, how to develop those people. And that's just been, it's a lot easier now, but like then it was pretty bad. I went through a couple not so great hires in that 2022 timeframe that just learn your lessons from it, right?
Yeah, I'd love to dive into the hiring sector of business in a second, but to get to hiring, we obviously need lead flow. We need clients. And I think like whenever I talk to any business that is, you know, not where they want to be, the most common conversation that comes up is I just don't know how to get the clients. I don't know where they come from. And that was something in the beginning that we had to kind of figure out, how do you stand out as your own entity to try and drive client flow to you, because of your connections in industry. It was always a wonder of like, where is the client flow coming from, and how do we make it yours so you can control it? What are some of the things that you learned along the way that allowed you to get a little bit, even if it's 1%, more predictable with client flow?
So, and this would be like to speak to the audience that maybe doesn't have the biggest business knowledge, right? Just understanding how pre-purchase leads into purchase, and then purchase leads into post-purchase, and tracking that data that influence the next metric. So like how one performs influence how the next one performs. And then same off the back end, the post-purchase can affect the pre-purchase, right? And like what that client inquiry and interest is, because like we made this point earlier, like I go win a show and overall, and I have 25 to 20 inquiries in my inbox the next week. It's like, that's a post-purchase thing that's now affecting the front end of my business, right? And getting people into that funnel of knowing who we are. So I think it's something that understanding how those interactions influence each other so that you can shore up each one of those systems to now speak to a larger audience that's in your psychological profile. I think especially when we talk about the conversion from pre-purchase to purchase. So taking someone who's interested in your content, we have a pretty good understanding. It takes 7 to 9 interactions with your content before a lot of people will buy with you. And that's if they resonate with your stuff and they fit with you within the coaching industry. It's such a buy into people rather than a
people buy people before they buy brand.
Yeah. So
sure.
Getting people from pre-purchase into purchase, like what does that look like? And not automating it, but almost automating it to the point that you're kind of removed from it is huge. And it's so integral of like, especially if you don't have the audience, like you're starting to look into, well, how do I not only build my audience, but how does my circle help me with building that audience? And a lot of times it's just being strategic with how you do partnerships, and strategic with content production, and strategic with where you go do podcasts. And do you have a podcast? Like that, I mean, 70% of business owners don't have a podcast.
And what is it? 90% don't make it past episode 11.
Yeah. So it's like, that's probably a big turning point. Like that's how people long form. We talked about this. I love long form. I can doubt my thought process. People get to know you in long form. I have people meet me at shows and they're like, I feel like I know you already. Like, yeah, because you've been watching hundreds and hundreds of hours of a podcast that I've been speaking on for years. Yeah,
we had an experience at the IFBB Fix with that.
I loved it. Shout out to, that was Mel, right?
Mel Ward, yeah.
Mel Ward. Oh my God, that scream coming down the stairs was hilarious.
Yeah, it was funny. We're on the way in and you're just like, I wonder if people recognize me. I was like, yeah, they will. Just wait for it.
Yeah, and I don't mean to be on my phone, but I've got 5 athletes competing today, and I need to make sure that they're going to win.
Well, that's the unseen version of being a business owner at the volume that you are. Like, you have to be on.
Yeah, it's never off.
Yeah, well, no off switch, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
But more so from I think, even if you look at that from, staying on topic with the client acquisition side of things, like, and I know that we spoke about this past weekend with the workshop here, that the first pillar of any sort of business is service. And you need to produce, like, we are in the results business. And in your case specifically, it's like being in the business of producing winners. And if you want to improve the sales cycle, or even just the conversion cycle, because often, correct me if I'm wrong, people getting on a call with you now, at least, it's not really a sale. It's like they're there to sign because they've created some sort of buy-in to all of your pre-purchase process, including like previous clients' experience.
Yeah.
Is that planned for you?
What do you mean?
Do you plan? Obviously, you're a big preacher of like service first, be great at what you do.
but do you like plan that automated process to try and make sure that like winners create more inquiries, or is it just happenstance?
It's kind of happenstance. Like, you just be good at your job. It gets around.
Mm-hmm.
I do tell people stories. That's where I try to do it on a public platform.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you're not going to go through and watch all these podcasts, but if you go through a lot of podcasts, I tell people stories and client stories on the podcast for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, it's to build an attachment to someone might resonate with, right?
Yeah,
And
it's emotional attachment.
It's emotional attachment. So I do try to, like, one of the best books I think you could ever read is Building a Story Brand, because like, even if you don't fully use the information in that exactly how it's built, you can understand how people attach themselves to others.
Yeah. I think with that as well, it allows you to see your businesses. And it's probably the first question that I asked you in the very beginning of us working together. It's like, who's the superhero of your story? And you probably answered you. And it's actually the client. And reading that book will allow you to see that the client's journey is more important than yours.
Mm-hmm.
And I think doing that in the infancy of any business, knowing like where you fit in the business and where the client fits, it, like I see it all the time, pays dividends.
Yeah, and I think it's, I'm also in a place where, especially now with the reputation, I'm fixing problems a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
with why they didn't win or why they weren't the best they could be on stage. So it's a very quick buy-in for me now.
Yep.
Because the pain points are so clear. When you're starting out and you don't fully like know what you work well with, you're trying to figure out the pain points you solve very efficiently.
Yeah.
Because that's how you scale your business the quickest. And then your hires fill the roles of pain points that you struggle with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you scale.
Yeah. When we really pull this back to client acquisition of like knowing the pain points, how did you find the pain points of your clientele so you could start to A, produce more content on it, and B, streamline that sales process a little bit more? How did you really isolate it other than just they didn't win? What were the type of questions you would ask to try and find out what they really struggled with?
You can do it a couple different ways. So I'm at a point now where I can use an inquiry form,
Mm-hmm.
but early on, like, you want to make that click to booking a call as quick as possible. So like, I did it as like the first question within the call. It would be first off to get them talking
Mm-hmm.
about themselves. It would be a question along the lines of like, one, how did you hear about me? And what was it that made you think that I could help you do what it is you want to do to reach your goals?
Mm-hmm.
In that question, the why was it, or what was it that made you think, they're going to tell me every reason that they're attracted to my coaching or my content or an athlete I coach or whatever that may be. And they're probably going to tell me the negative experiences that they had with this previous coach,
Mm-hmm.
so that consult process can now be why everything I do is better than the negative experience that they had with the previous person. And this, I'm very explicit on, like, I don't really care who your coach was. I don't want to know names. I don't really care. I'm not going to talk negative about anyone. But if there's a problem and it wasn't getting fixed, let me show you how I'm going to fix it.
Yeah, it's experiential.
Yeah. And I've done this a few times with conversations that get longer to try to quell the sales consult,
Mm-hmm.
is to use a client to show that I've solved that same problem before.
Yeah.
So I'll keep I often use a client in a sales consult process anyways, but I'll keep a couple like open so that I can flip to them pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Especially now, like, I have an inquiry form because people are bought in enough to fill it out. I know it's coming.
Yep.
So I can have like clients ready, but it's a quick way to like show, hey, like, you've done this before, and you can
Proof of concept.
proof of concept, right? Which is, again, just building winning athletes.
Mm.
It all comes down to building winning athletes.
It's interesting. It's not interesting. It's great to hear, because I think this resonates with like just your learning curve as well. That I think a lot of the people in your position in the industry, like just with even status projection and so on, there is an ego attached to, I don't want to have to, call it justify myself. I don't want to show proofs of concept, because people should be getting onto this conversation knowing who I am and what I do already. And like the simple answer to that is, most of the time you're just leaving money on the table if you aren't prepared to just actually get on and problem solve for someone.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you could have all the social proof you want on your socials, like front facing on Instagram. Great. But if someone doesn't feel like any of those examples resonate to them, and you can show them this one person that has the exact problem that they have had, that is the difference between making a conversion or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's they can see themselves in there. This is so detailed, but I'll do it sometimes. Like, if I have pictures beforehand, which most of the time I do, like hair color or build,
Mm-hmm.
matching that to the client that I show them.
Yeah, character profile.
So it's a character profile that they can cross into, right? Like people don't see this side of me because I don't talk about it much, but like I am so obsessed with understanding humans to the level that I can now pull the best out of that human. And that's what my consult process is now, is like, what makes this athlete tick in a positive way? What's make this athlete tick in a negative way? How does my coaching systems, multiple different variations of the system, fit this client to create the solution they need to create a better athlete? And that's just come from like, and I don't run scripts. We had this conversation earlier in the week, but running like flow charts of sales consult processes and failing and succeeding a couple different variations at a time to learn how to do that. Obviously now I'm in the place where I'm removing myself from the sales process, but
you've created a system that's repeatable.
But I've created a system that's repeatable, and I spent how many years running the sales process? Like lots.
Yeah.
Like, so, and the speed at which you scale will tell you how long you stay in the sales process. But I think a lot of it from a buy-in perspective is aligning your coaching as a solution to whatever those pain points are, positively and negatively for the client, so that they can see themselves succeeding in your coaching setup. If you have to jump through hoops to do that for a client, I would argue that they're what I call like a vampire client potentially, where they're not going to do well. It's going to be a bad review for your business, and it's going to suck the life out of you.
Absolutely. And if you have those red lights on the front end, they're going to get way more bright on the back end. Like lessons learned. We've all made that mistake.
We've all made that mistake. I made it a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Like, see a client's got great development, you're excited to work with them, and then they get in the system, and it's just like, this is not a good fit.
Yeah. You mentioned system fluidity there, like having multiple different iterations of systems. Yeah. When we first met, you had one, or maybe lack of one.
Lack of one. Half of one.
What were the big things where you realized like I need systems here to actually be fluid with the clientele coming in? Yeah. And why did you implement them so aggressively?
People don't communicate the same way. All coaching, no matter what coaching business you run, gym pop, bodybuilding, powerlifting, sports performance, doesn't matter.
Business, same.
Business is all completely hinged on how well you communicate and the dynamic of the coach and the client and communicating back and forth with each other. Because intent in communication and understanding of how accurately people deliver information is huge. And the reason I built so many systems is because I've worked with people who are verbal communicators or written communicators, or objectively can put data in a sheet well, but subjectively can't tell me how they feel, right? So that might be a person who can verbal and written communicate, but I have them verbally communicate because I can pick up on tones of voice rather than actually listening to what they subjectively tell me, right? Like I had a client, I won't mention their name, who I took this person from being a nobody to almost winning a pro card a few times. And it was the first prep that not only did that person get into full contest shape, but with a crap ton more muscle. Like we're talking like, trying to do the conversion to kilos, like 8 or 9 kilos extra tissue relative to the last time they competed.
Yeah.
That person's ability to communicate how well they're recovering and their fatigue management is very low because they've done one prep and they have a whole lot more muscle and they're reaching a condition state they've never reached before. Once I get that person to 6 weeks out, like listening to them tell me that they're too far gone or whatever it may be is not an accurate viewpoint of where that person's actually at. That's where like I'll lean on data and verbal like expressions of how they're doing to extremely make a decision about what needs to happen next within that coaching environment. And that's just one example of why I have multiple versions of my system, because I need the same data. I need to know where the client's at. People are not going to be able to tell you that in the same way.
Yeah, how you get it.
How you get it is going to be different. I have like, this is so simplistic and like people would shake their head at me for knowing that I still use this sometimes. I have an email outline for people who are like tech illiterate and don't communicate well through verbal. I'm like, fill this email outline in the same email string every week.
Yep.
And this is how you'll check in. Right. And it's just because that's literally the quickest way for me to get the amount of information I need. They hate sheets, they hate apps, and they can't send me a voice note because they probably, one, don't know how to send a voice note, but two,
Or they forget.
Yeah. Right. So like, I don't use that often, That's probably 4%, 5% of my clients, but it's there.
Mm-hmm.
And it fits within the same way that I receive information and give out information.
Because how you extrapolate it doesn't change.
Doesn't change.
Yeah. I think that's where like, when we first started having conversations around like efficiency and systemized anything, there was a lot of like, I guess a lot of like trying to plug holes. Like, cool, where is your market currently? Let's meet them where they are and what do they need? And then let's future-proof this with extra systems on top of that can layer and add more simplistic nature for you, provided they don't add more complex nature for the client.
Yeah.
And that's subjective to client as they come.
Yeah. So like now, like so many of my people use Sheets because they want to use Sheets. It's like, it's actually, so it's, I don't talk about it very early in the sales consult process because it's like a benefit that they get to use the Sheets. It's not like the actual coaching solution problem solving thing.
No, that's an ancillary point of value.
Yeah, ancillary point of value, exactly. So like they get enjoyment out of that much detail in using the Sheets. I had to be careful because that much detail can drive fatigue.
Yes.
Fatigue with people, but it's something that to kind of wrap it up in a bow. I'm just trying to match the skill set of the client, generationally, tech-wise, communication-wise, to the same metrics that I need. And a lot of that are variations of the Sheets. So like it's still Sheets for a lot of clients. It's just different versions of the Sheets. I have some people who are in the Kahuna's app. Like I use that for a few of the people, like the J3U coaching variation of it that we have a couple extra, bonus material that's outside of the Kahuna's app specifically. But like I have like 7, 8 people that are on that, right? Because it just fits them.
Yeah.
Right. But I've done this through trial and error and trying to figure out what's going to be the best way to produce winning athletes. That's literally my whole point. We talked about this in the seminar here. I've literally taken on preps to develop an athlete and their ability to check in and communicate, because prep provides structure. Structure provides an environment to teach. An environment to teach allows me to put new skills in an athlete. I've prepped them for that purpose solely, knowing that the off season after the prep and the prep that comes after that is the one where I'm going to put a winning athlete on stage.
Yeah, it's forward projecting. It's also like when you plan it, when you map it out like that, it sounds somewhat inefficient to have multiple systems to fit the athlete where they are.
So efficient.
But it's efficient to know your athlete so you don't have to follow up for information. It's communication cycle efficiency.
Yep.
And when you know that, the efficiency doesn't just need to be one size fits all, do this. It's what can I plug and play? And where can I get the most efficiency, like on the back end? And I think that a lot of people, especially a lot of people I speak to, they want one system to rule them all. It's the Lord of the Rings, like the one ring. They want the one thing, and it's like the Hail Mary. Yeah, they want the precious. And it doesn't exist in most cases. You need to be able to have flexibility on the back end with systems, provided you know how to plug in appropriately.
Yeah.
As long as there's not user error, you're sweet.
And to make a point with an example, like my pet peeve is a check-in, same check-in, that dings back and forth between coach and client. Like I have to ask a follow-up question.
Yeah, it needs to be comprehensive.
And then they send it back and then they're not fully clear with the answer to the question. So I have to ask another question in order to get all the information. So that's communication inefficiency that now makes that check-in from however long it takes you to do a check-in within your system to 2 or 3 times that time to do that same check-in. That's where you lose time. That's where having a time problem can really start to like compound. It's like, okay, the first time problem most people is like sessions, right? They're doing in-person sessions. They're trying to switch to a hybrid model, but they're having to do something in-person to pay their bills. They can't convert into the online to do the on the business stuff. Like, cool. But once you're fully in the online space, it's all about how efficiently can you gather the data you need to make a good decision and then communicate that to the athlete in the way that they receive information well.
Yeah, and it be a final decision.
And it'd be a final decision, and that'd be the end of it. The back and forth situation is why I have so many different versions of it, because I'm trying to avoid that at all costs so that I can make better decisions too, because like when you start that back and forth, it gets to a point where you're like, okay, we just need to do this and move.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always lead to the best decision making on the coaching side.
Yeah, there's obviously extenuating circumstances that, like, if you have someone 5 days out from a show, it's conversational, of course. But like week to week in the midst of an off season, right, in the middle of it, from what I've seen at least, conversational based check-in process or systems that lead on conversational process lead to inefficiency. It needs to be more so statement based, like this is decision, it's not conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And then action can be taken and you don't get lost in the translation of like, what if?
Yeah. Yeah. That's where like, I've done it a couple of times where it's a collaborative coaching process
Mm-hmm.
and that never really ends well.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's, I told you a story earlier in the week about where that kind of fell through. It's like
There's too many cooks in the kitchen, man.
too many cooks in the kitchen. It's a quick way to ruin a reputation if you're not careful, because like when someone goes rogue,
Yeah.
that from a public perspective looks like a decision that you made,
Yes.
and it's not. And that's where like I learned my lesson the hard way on that one.
Yeah. Do you think there's any other like large examples where you've learned a lesson the hard way?
Yes, of course. I think a lot of it, I hate to keep coming back to the same topic, but like how I communicate to people, changing how they respond or react, like the difference between responding and reacting. Hopefully people understand this, but responding being solution driven, being able to get to a place where we're making a productive next step, reacting being an emotional way to respond, or reacting being a way to emotionally, I don't want to use the same word, respond or react to a situation that's in the building, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or a situation that's in the check-in process. And so a lot of it has come from, I've always been good about not reacting and responding, but I haven't always been good about the way that I respond being specific to how I get that client not to react.
Yeah.
How do I get my point across in an emotionally intelligent way that pushes that athlete to do better? Whether that's I need them to adhere more, or whether I need more from them in a training setting or a cardio setting or whatever that may be. That's where I hate to harp on communication, but your best skill as a coach, once you get past the intellect of understanding the X and O's of coaching and how to flex that across many different clients, is how to drive people to act stronger on their ability to pursue their goals. Because no matter, even the most strong-willed athletes are going to be demotivated at some point, and you need to be that like ability to see that in the communication system that you have, to be able to take that athlete from here, bring them back up here, and execute at that level that they're capable of. That's where most of my mistakes have been. I'm very objective and facts-based, and I'm very I'm very brutally honest at times, and that's not well received in all populations within competitors because of the emotional nature of prepping. It can be received as like kind of harsh, too harsh. I mean, there's times to be harsh, but that's where I've learned to like say, hey, like I need more from you in 7 different ways.
Yeah.
And it's just like knowledge of like emotional intelligence and communication skills and how that looks like for different athletes.
Is that something that you've mapped out so that you can pass it on to staff, and when you hire that like they actually come in with an idea?
Yeah, I will say like, I do education and mentoring with all the coaches on staff. It is largely built on how do I pull more out of this athlete, less about like X's and O's of coaching. Like I'll teach them theoretical conceptual stuff, but a lot of it is managing clients.
It's taking your standard operating procedures and passing it on.
Yeah, and it's working. Like we've already won 2 overalls and it's April.
Yeah.
With the coaches that are on staff, like not including mine, right? So it's like, yeah, you're like what, 5 shows deep into the season, and the coaches already have 2 overalls. It's like, okay, something's clearly working here. Like a lot of these people's low hanging fruit, I'd say over half of the staff's low hanging fruit is not intellect.
It's not ability.
Not ability.
Yeah.
It's the ability to pull more out of an athlete, and the ability to motivate someone to do better, and the foresight to prep them at the right time.
Yeah, so it's not ability, it's psychology.
So huge. And business, this is full circle. Learning business showed me how important psychology was to be able to scale a business in client inquiries, in client development, in staff hiring, in staff development. And then it just like clicked one day that, holy shit, you're coaching these people too. Like all of this has to happen with these clients you work with over time. So just like you build out a path to develop an employee to reach their whatever their self-actualization is, you need to do the same for clients. When you build that timeline out, like you should be building that timeline according to developing that athlete in the way that they see themselves being successful.
Mm-hmm. It's not just numbers on a board.
Not just numbers on a board.
It's like, yeah, I know you're a big proponent of like mapping out a skeleton plan ahead of time, like whether it be a rate of loss plan or whether it be a full prep. Knowing where those trigger points are across that skeleton plan, knowing where like potentially you need to push an athlete, knowing where potentially they may be more susceptible to emotional hardship, where you have to be less direct. Knowing that early and knowing the athlete all comes down to just business development of like that's happened over time, because now you've realized that if you do that well through prep, your like call it retention rate, re-up rate, whatever it might be, post show, they're sticking around.
Yeah. And it's where you can actually coach, in my opinion. A lot of the initial processes are the first phase with someone is like solving problems.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, which is why I prefer off-season phases as my first phase, because I'm just trying to figure out what does this client not do well. How do I give them resources to, which is why I've built so many resources. Like, if you want me to be honest with you, the applied hypertrophy optimization module, the thing that me and John go in the gym and teach you everything about every potential movement that you could use for hypertrophy, is so that I could be like, hey, I'm seeing X, Y, Z in your training videos. This is a comprehensive resource that I've built that you can go self-educate and circumvent a lot of this back and forth that we're having to do here. Because if I educate you there, when I point it out on a video, your ability to go apply it in the gym now just cuts your time in half of being able to learn it.
Yep.
So it's like intellect building, right?
Yeah.
There's some athletes that need that. There's some athletes that don't. There's some athletes you need to pull back from an intellect perspective. Like, hey, like shut your brain off and just do what I tell you, because you're doing this wrong, being so obsessed with the minutia detail, and you're driving yourself insane, and that stress is no longer. So to bring it back to like, building athletes, it's that first phase is largely problem identification, which is why I try to build timelines past the first phase to show people that I have a vision for where they're going to go. Because especially at this point, I don't work with very many clients anymore, or relative to what I worked with in the past, right? I create a little bit more personal relationships with the people that I work with because I'm very passionate about what I do. I love coaching, and I'm so emotionally invested in everybody that I work with that it sometimes in a coaching situation, if someone doesn't communicate well, hard to see that passion and hard to see that vision that they're got something for you, right? So like, just to give Lydia was here for the seminar, right? She's recently started with me over the last month or so. Like, hey, like I'm taking you from a situation that wasn't my favorite of like where we were at, but I can do something if you give me time. So rather than trying to do a pro debut this year, like let's plan it for 2025. Let's map out all the phases between now and 2025, and let's execute it on a level that I know you're capable of. And so now we're going through this like mini cut problem identification in the gym. Like she has glute development one side to the other that's a little bit less than that. And I'm going through all the inputs that are driving that from a functional perspective, from an execution perspective. And so like that's a big emotional investment on my end, but I've also earned the right to do that because I've, again, produced winning athletes and I've solved these problems before. And so that emotional investment now creates buy-in from the client that allows them to develop into the athlete I need them to be. It all starts with you.
That buy-in as well is very crucial. I think like I want to kind of just look under the microscope a little bit with something you mentioned there, because I feel like it will probably fly over a lot of people's heads, that often action is preceded by understanding. And you mentioned there that the hypertrophy optimization model could be used, and perhaps was one day initially planned to be used as a client education model to go and get better at the thing so that you could circumvent the back and forth. That is something that if all the listeners at home could start to just implement, even on a low tier, if you didn't want to go into a full model development of education, if you had a privately listed YouTube function that educated clients on all the movements and how to and why to, not just as a simple, hey, do it this way, but it's why we do this, how we do this, what are all the problems that your clients face over a 16-week prep, or for a Gen Pop, a 16-week minimum term. What are the problems they face? When do they face them? Can you pre-solve them as they come up through an education model so they take better action and they stay longer?
Also matching that to the skill level of the person that you coach.
Yeah.
Like a gym pop is not going to go buy a HO and be like, I love this.
Of course.
Unless they're
But
on the side of gym pop that they're like very physique development oriented without the competing.
That comes down to knowing your customer.
Knowing your customer, right? So like gym pop Sally over here, who just wants to be able to chase her kids around, doesn't need to know the force application and mechanics of a pendulum squat and why more torque is generated through the knee if you set up something in one direction or the other.
Yeah,
Like,
but
no.
it might help if she knows like what a calorie balance is.
Yeah, or it might help to say like, hey, let's put your feet here instead of here.
Correct.
And then squat. Like just whatever that is, like
It's contextual to the client at hand and like where your business is. But I think like that was it's such a obviously something that's come so second nature to us that it's like, oh cool, education model, put it on the back end to circumvent back and forth conversational education.
Yeah.
If you can do that and implement, then you can implement that in so many different ways. But if that's just a small little nugget to take away from some strategy that has saved Luke a bunch of time, and I know how much time that saves you, very valuable little nugget.
Yeah, and I don't want to make this sound like it's an easy thing to do. Like the female module, for example, like that took me 11 months to build with John.
Yep.
11 months. Like that's not something that's...
It's not something that most are prepared to do.
No.
And that's why you are where you are.
Yeah. And so like, look, we need a picture of the unicorn picture from the seminar.
I'll put it up.
But like obviously the problems I run into are not the problems that everybody runs into, right? There's a lot of people in my space that run into the same problems.
Mm.
It's the variation of the problem and the solution of that. So like in the coursework or whatever that is to save your back end time, the barrier to entry needs to match the level of commitment of the client that you serve, and the level of content needs to match the commitment of the client that you serve, and it needs to match the level of goal set that the client you serve.
I agree.
I coach coaches. Like that's what I do. I help people build their businesses on everything from the back end process all the way up through the front. And I spend 95% of my time on how do I do a better job of back end so that that service is so high, no one wants to leave.
I agree.
Or everybody wants to come. And so like, because of that, my long form is extremely long form. Like, because everybody wants to know the nicks and crannies and details of everything that they could possibly see in a coaching situation. Like my side effect management lecture in the PD module is 83 slides long. It's 3 hours of recording. You know how long that took me to build?
I can imagine.
Like that's the type of stuff I have to do for the consumer that I serve. But that's not everybody's consumer, right? Like it's building those solutions relative, and it all comes back down to psychological profile and understanding your business as a brand. And I love branding. Branding is like my shtick in business, and the ability to create the attachment to the human emotion, brain, gut, gonads, heart, whatever that may be, and then matching all of your products or services on a value ladder according to how it saves you time and provides value to the client.
Yeah. I don't think many people think, especially like you're largely speaking like, you know, milligrams and totals and body weight and metrics to in your content, right? But over the last 4 years, you've definitely become a very astute businessman in your own right. And it's we can have these conversations behind closed doors, and we can kind of go through this stuff, and it's like, cool, we're talking the same language now. And it's very interesting it's great to see that you have taken a very different approach to what I assume most do in your position, because you are thinking forward. You are thinking like, okay, 5, 6, 7, 10 years down the line, like what does this brand stand for? And how do we make it stand the test of time?
Which is, I told you J3 coaching was like something that took so much out of me because I needed to prove that it would work. And I won't share the numbers here, but like it's working.
It's working, yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with like, I'm seeing myself in moving into that position of like, I'll coach the high-end athletes, and that's what I'm going to coach. And I really thoroughly enjoy coaching high-end athletes. And high-end is like a level of execution. Like that's what I classify as high-end. And my job now is to give people their livelihoods in a way that they never thought possible by developing them as coaches or as people in the business that are doing different tasks. And to do that well, I need the business knowledge to be able to build that path forward for them. Because I know what my path forward is. I sit down and have this chat with myself on a whiteboard twice a year. So at every change of the 2 quarters. And that for me is like so important to be able to give them what they want, because I'm no longer, I'm the face of the brand largely, whether it's like along with John, right? Like I'm the face of the brand for No Switch Fitness. Obviously I'm the face of the brand for J3 Coaching with John. I'm the face of the brand of J3 University with John. But as we scale, there's going to be other people who develop into those roles. And like, it's my job to now figure out how that's going to happen, not in 5 years, like to do that now. So I think a lot of it comes to a full circle of like, I love what I do, but what's required of you requires you to upskill, and whatever that sector is that you need, and it'll never end.
I agree. It's never ending. This podcast is called The Undeniable Show.
Okay.
I'm going to just kind of hit you with one or two more questions, but the whole concept of undeniable is how can you stack enough proof that you become undeniably who you say you are? And it's a question that I'd like to ask you is, what makes you undeniably stable within your industry long term?
That's a hard question. Undeniably stable within my industry has to do with playing the long game. I think that's why brand is my shtick, because brand is a long game play, right? There's an ethos and a core culture that I want around me. If that's not around me, like, you're not going to be a part of my core culture or my core circle. Like, the reason John and I are best friends, or you and I are great friends, is like we resonate on some level from a culture perspective, right? Like, I can sit down and talk with John about something, or I can sit down and talk with you about something, and we see similar or the same visions of what the path forward looks like, right? Maybe someone provides a better solution for it, but it's still getting to the same place at the end of the day. A lot of that has to come with not the quick cash grab and the decisions to spend money for the long-term play sometimes, or to to not take opportunities because they don't fit. Like, I've had so many opportunities on my table over the last year that I've said no to because it doesn't fit where I'm trying to go. And the long-term play is a hard sell.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
That's a lot of patience too.
Patience, and people need to pay their bills, and there's a sense of urgency, especially if you have your back against the wall, right?
Yeah.
Everybody wants the Lambo and the 4-hour work week, Tim Ferriss's 4-hour work week, which, if you've ever read that book, unbelievably dull, but such good information.
Yeah. It's just always not, it's not often. I think people read that and see that as the outcome, not the journey.
It's not.
Like, it might be, they see that as the immediate.
Immediate, yeah.
It's the potential outcome one day that even if you get there, you're probably not going to want to do it.
We talked about this, like, with the story that Aaron told at dinner last night. It's like, if you're getting to a point where you can spend millions of dollars on something just because you don't want to show up.
Yeah.
You have that kind of money. It's like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Like, you got to develop in some way, right?
Something's got to happen.
Yeah.
Got to be something more.
Yeah. So I think it's a good read. It's so dull. I fell asleep so many times reading it, but like, it's a good read. I wouldn't put it at the top of my list, but I think a lot of it comes down to, like, people see that and they want it tomorrow, or they want it next year, or they want it years from now. It's like 2024, I started my business in 2016, and I'm still spending the majority of nights at my computer.
Yeah.
Like, I own or have ownership in 3 businesses now, and I still do that. It's like, for me, winning moving forward is, how do I buy back my time?
Yeah.
Now at scale. And so I think it's just understanding that there's a process to that and a journey to that, and that quick ad spend to generate immediate cash flow is probably not the best long-term play. Ads fit in business models, and they work, and they absolutely work if you optimize return on ad spend, but they're not.
They're not the Hail Mary that the industry will make it be.
No.
Yeah, I agree. Man, thank you for, firstly, thank you for making the trek all the way out here to Australia.
Yeah,
it's
of course.
Been a pleasure to have you here. It's been quite surreal to be able to present alongside you, obviously, given where we first met in 2020 over Zoom. Trying to solve a few problems. To have you here now has been pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
And thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for just hanging out. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
Thank you. Do you want to give everyone a little bit of a rundown of where they can find you, what you do?
Yeah, of course.
Take it
So
away.
my Instagram's No Switch Fitness, all one word, super easy to find. It's a picture of me in a teal shirt. The main place for content and platforms outside of that main page is going to be any of the J3 University or J3 coaching pages. J3 University is our collective of courses that we've built to help you with every aspect of coaching that you could potentially need, whether that's physique development for high-end competitors or just learning how to coach and the X's and O's and physiology of that. So that's going to be J3 University. J3 Coaching is our coaching platform now where, like, if you have a problem that needs to be solved, I have a coach on staff that can solve that problem. Like, it's not just like, and right now I'm doing all the consults for that to match those people accordingly to those problem solvings, right? And so that as that scales and develops, obviously that's going to be an awesome team that's just continuing to grow. But that's come out of the back of people doing the courses and needing some solution, and J3 coaching team that I love every single one of them. They're so great. Like, they all do their job so well. And so that's going to be like the primary solution for coaching. You can check that out at j3coaching.com. And yeah, that's going to be the primary places to find what we do.
And you personally offer up your time occasionally for
consults.
consults to help people with their client issues and or business issues if needed.
Or athlete journey issues or whatever it may be, for sure. And so, like, I have a link for that you guys can book in. I'm sure we'll drop that.
Yeah, we'll pop that below.
But,
that's fine. Luke is someone I trust in business. He's someone obviously I've worked closely with, but he's he holds his own right in it. So if you get a chance to, definitely have a chat with him.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, Luke. See ya.